What would you do if the man you once called your brother, the man who stood beside you through blood, betrayal, and battle, suddenly became a shadow of himself, lying helpless behind hospital walls, with the future of everything you built together hanging in the balance? What if the empire you fought for, the brotherhood you believed was eternal, came crashing down with one diagnosis, one scan, one silent, terrifying confirmation that nothing would ever be the same? This isn't just another WWE injury. This is something far more devastating. Something that has broken through the surface of the ring and clawed its way into the hearts of everyone who ever believed in the Shield, in legacy, in the unbreakable bond between Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins. It started with a whisper. Backstage murmurs during the Saturday night's main event. A slight limp. A wince as Seth Rollins descended the steel steps. A brief moment when he clutched his right knee and grimaced before continuing as if nothing had happened. For the audience, it was easy to miss. But for those who knew him, who'd watched him push his body beyond human limits for over a decade, this wasn't routine. This wasn't performance. This was something else. By the end of the night, Rollins had disappeared from public view. No interviews. No post-match celebration. Just silence. And then, an image. A grainy, leaked photo of Seth being wheeled into a private medical facility in Chicago, hoodie pulled low over his face, his hands shaking as he covered his leg. The headlines came quickly. Rollins injured? SummerSlam in doubt? But behind the scenes, the reality was far worse than the public knew. Roman Reigns got the call at 3:47 a.m. He was in California at the time, training in isolation, away from the chaos, away from the politics of Raw and SmackDown. His phone lit up in the darkness. The message was brief. It's serious. You need to come. What happened next wasn't caught by cameras or documented by social media. It was raw. Private. Human. Roman Reigns, the tribal chief, the unshakable head of the table, broke down in tears when doctors placed the MRI scans in front of him. A full ACL rupture. Partial MCL tear. Meniscus shredded. 9 months minimum. No SummerSlam. No Survivor Series. No WrestleMania return plan. And worse than all of that, no certainty he'd return the same. Seth Rollins, the architect, the visionary, was facing not just a medical recovery, but the slow disintegration of everything he had fought to protect: his career, his identity, his legacy. What hit Roman hardest wasn't the diagnosis itself. It was the silence that followed. The way Seth couldn't look him in the eye. The way he whispered, "I'm sorry," as if it was his fault. As if breaking his body for the WWE Universe wasn't already a sacrifice beyond comprehension. For Roman, this wasn't about the titles or the spotlight. This was family. This was Sierra, Hotel, India. Echo, Lima, Delta. This was the war-torn bond forged in betrayal and blood, and now, it was slipping away. Backstage at Raw, those closest to Roman noticed the change almost immediately. He wasn't speaking. He wasn't smiling. He walked with a weight on his shoulders that even the tribal chief couldn't hide. When Paul Heyman asked him what he was going to do, Roman said nothing. He just stared at the locker once shared by 3 brothers and turned away. But the situation wasn't just personal. It was political. Rollins was set to headline SummerSlam. He was being groomed to carry the Raw brand into the next era alongside Cody Rhodes. And now, the entire main event landscape had collapsed. Triple H was furious. Not at Seth, but at the system. The overbooked calendar. The pressure to constantly deliver. He reportedly told WWE medical staff, "We're losing our stars faster than we can build them." Behind closed doors, there were emergency meetings. What to do about the main event? How to pivot the storyline? Whether to acknowledge the severity of Seth's injury publicly, or bury it behind vague updates. But there was one man who wasn't playing games. Roman Reigns. He flew to Chicago under the radar. No press. No entourage. Just a hoodie, a beard untrimmed, and eyes red from sleepless nights. When he entered the hospital room, he stood silently at the foot of Seth's bed. Seth looked up and said, "You don't have to be here." Roman replied, "I had to be." They didn't talk for hours. Just sat. Brothers who once tore each other apart, now bound by something deeper than storylines or titles, grief, because in that hospital room, both men were mourning something. For Seth, the loss of momentum. For Roman, the loss of time. Of legacy. Of what could have been if fate had been kinder. But it wasn't just the two of them feeling the tremors. Dean Ambrose, now John Moxley, was watching from afar. He didn't tweet. He didn't make a statement. But sources close to AEW confirmed that he sent a private message to Roman the next day. It read, "I heard. Let me know if I need to be there." That one sentence changed everything, because this wasn't just an injury. This was the unraveling of a story over a decade in the making. The Shield, once divided, betrayed, and scattered, was now facing the kind of crisis that no heel turn, no main event booking could ever repair. And as Roman sat beside Seth, watching the machines monitor his heart rate and oxygen levels, he whispered something that no camera caught, "I thought we had more time." Seth didn't answer. But he reached for Roman's hand. And Roman held on tight. Back in Stamford, the WWE creative team was scrambling. They wanted to pivot. Bring in a new rivalry. Push a fresh face. But something about this story felt sacred. They knew they couldn't just move on. Not from this, because every fan who ever believed in the Shield wasn't just watching a storyline fade. They were watching a legacy fracture. A dynasty stall. As news of the diagnosis began to leak, first through whispers, then through anonymous sources, fans reacted with heartbreak and disbelief. Hashtags trended. Hashtag thank you Seth flooded timelines. Fan art poured in. WWE shops saw a spike in Shield-era merchandise, and then came the press release. It was simple. Clinical. WWE superstar Seth Rollins will be sidelined for an estimated 9 months due to a severe knee injury sustained during Saturday night's main event. He is currently undergoing treatment and wishes to thank the WWE Universe for their support. But behind the scenes, the truth was far messier. Seth wasn't just recovering. He was reeling. In private conversations, he expressed fears about never wrestling again. About being forgotten. About what his legacy would be if his last moment in the ring was a limp backstage and a gasp of pain. For Roman, that fear cut too deep. Because Roman Reigns knows what it means to have your body betray you. He's walked the hallways of hospitals before, twice during leukemia battles that nearly ended everything. He knows what it means to wonder if the world will move on without you. And the pain of watching fans forget what you fought for. So when he left Seth's bedside, he didn't go back to the arena. He went dark. No social media. No interviews. No backstage appearances. People close to him say he's considering something he never thought he'd do, taking time off, because for Roman Reigns, this isn't just about protecting the head of the table. It's about protecting a brother who never stopped believing in him, even when the world turned its back. And now, the WWE Universe is left to ask the questions no one wants to face. Is this the end of the Shield? Is Seth Rollins going to make it back? And if he doesn't, what happens to Roman? What happens to the legacy they built together, match by match, betrayal by betrayal, redemption by redemption? The locker room is quiet these days. Quieter than usual. There's a gap in the air where Seth's voice used to echo. A silence where his presence used to steady the chaos. But the one sound that still lingers, if you listen closely enough, is the whispered memory of a bond that defied every rule of wrestling storytelling. 3 brothers. One war and now, one devastating silence. In the weeks that followed Seth Rollins' devastating diagnosis, the WWE Universe continued spinning, but something felt off. It wasn't just a missing superstar. It was a missing heartbeat. Every segment, every promo, every match on Raw seemed to move in slow motion, as if the entire roster was holding its breath, waiting for news that might never come. For the fans, it was painful. For the wrestlers closest to Seth, it was unbearable. Backstage, people who once warred with Seth in the ring now found themselves quietly checking their phones during rehearsals, reading every update, scouring every leak. Becky Lynch, his wife, his anchor, remained publicly silent but was often seen backstage wiping away tears when she thought no one was looking. Her own future in WWE became uncertain as she balanced motherhood, storyline demands, and now the weight of watching the father of her child face his darkest chapter yet. Triple H, the man who once recruited Seth into NXT, reportedly visited him in Chicago under total secrecy. No camera crew. No press statement. Just a mentor sitting beside a fallen warrior, whispering encouragement and, some say, making promises about the future. One anonymous source claimed that as Hunter left the room, he turned and said, "You're not done, Seth. Not like this." But behind even those glimmers of hope lay a heavier truth: Seth Rollins may never return to the ring the way we remember him. His style, explosive, high-impact, relentless, was precisely what made him beloved, and precisely what made this injury so cruel. Doctors confirmed that recovery would be grueling. Months of rehab, muscle atrophy, ligament instability. The mental trauma of trusting a knee that once betrayed him without warning, and yet, in the darkest corners of this tragedy, a strange new light began to flicker. Roman Reigns. He had vanished in the immediate aftermath. Ignored calls. Missed scheduled appearances. WWE was tight-lipped, issuing only the bare minimum to the press. But according to those closest to him, Roman had returned to the one place that still felt like home, Pensacola, Florida, not as the tribal chief. Not as the head of the table but as Joe. Neighbors said he looked thinner. Worn down. Jogging alone along the beach in the early morning, eyes scanning the waves. Sitting silently at diners he once frequented with his cousin, the late Umaga. A man carrying the weight of too many losses, too many betrayals, and now, too much uncertainty. Reports began to swirl that Roman was writing something. Not for WWE. Not for a promo. But a letter. Or maybe a speech. Or maybe just a message he was trying to figure out how to deliver, not to the fans. Not even to Seth but to himself. And then, suddenly, Roman returned. 1 month after Seth Rollins collapsed, Roman Reigns walked into Monday Night Raw. No entrance music. No pyro. No announcement. Just a camera backstage capturing the moment every fan had prayed for and every superstar had feared. He wasn't in character. No gold on his shoulder. No flanked bloodline. Just Roman, hooded, solemn, eyes heavy with something that looked like grief and fury. The arena exploded. Fans rose to their feet, some cheering, others stunned into silence. This wasn't the return they expected. There was no speech. No battle cry. Just a walk. Down the corridor. Past the locker room. Past production. Past the memories of matches he and Seth once waged together, and into the ring. It wasn't scheduled. It wasn't on the rundown. But nobody stopped him. Roman stood in the center of that squared circle for what felt like forever. Then he took the microphone. And when he finally spoke, his voice wasn't that of a performer. It was raw. Honest. And real. You all think you know this business. You think you understand loyalty. You think you understand pain. But none of you know what it's like to watch your brother fall and realize you can't do a damn thing about it. The crowd fell completely silent. He paused, holding back emotion. I battled cancer. I fought betrayal. I built an empire with my own hands. But nothing prepares you for the phone call I got that night. When they told me Seth couldn't walk. When they told me he might not come back. When they told me my brother was broken. He stopped again. The camera zoomed in on his face. Tears shimmered at the corners of his eyes. And yeah, we've had our wars. Me and Seth, we tore each other apart. But what we had. What we still have. It's real. It's blood. And if this is really the end for him, then I swear to God, I'll make sure the world never forgets what he gave. The audience erupted in chants. Thank you, Seth. Thank you, Seth. Roman nodded slowly. So here's what's going to happen. While Seth heals, I'm going to fight. For him. For our legacy. For the Shield. He dropped the mic and walked out of the ring, but that moment sparked something. Not just in the audience, but in the locker room, because Roman's words weren't a promo. They were a declaration of war, not against a rival. Not against a faction. But against time, doubt, and silence. WWE officials scrambled to pivot storylines. Suddenly, Roman was front and center, not as a villain. Not even as a tweener. But as something else entirely, a man on a mission. He wasn't there to win titles. He wasn't there to build a Bloodline 2.0. He was there to finish what the Shield started. For Seth. For the fans. For every moment they sacrificed inside those ropes, and then came the rumor Jon Moxley, Dean Ambrose, was coming. AEW refused to comment. But backstage sources claim that quiet negotiations began immediately after Roman's speech. Not for a full-time contract. Not for a run, but for one night, one match. One final moment, the Shield. Together. One last time, and as fans began speculating wildly, one question surged louder than all others: would Seth Rollins be there? And even if he couldn't wrestle, would he walk? Would he stand alongside the men he once called brothers, just one last time? Sources inside WWE confirmed that the company was already in talks with medical professionals to determine if Seth could appear at SummerSlam, even if only for a symbolic moment. A walk down the ramp. A nod to the crowd. A tear in his eye. Because sometimes the most powerful moments in wrestling don't come from a punch or a spear, but from the silent recognition of a story too big for words. As for Roman Reigns, his focus remains singular. He's not chasing gold. He's not chasing glory. He's chasing redemption, for all the things he never said to Seth, for all the years they spent at war, for all the pain they endured, for this business, for the fans, and for each other, because in the end, titles fade. Reigns end. Factions collapse, but family leaves scars that never heal. And now, with Seth Rollins lying in recovery, Roman Reigns is finally revealing the side of himself we almost never see. Not the tribal chief, not the head of the table, but the brother. The friend. The man. A man fighting not just for legacy but for love, and in this war, love might be the only thing worth bleeding for. The days turned to weeks, and the pain didn't let up. Seth Rollins was still in recovery. His knee swollen, his mobility limited, his emotions unpredictable. One moment, he was cracking a joke with his physical therapist, determined to push through. The next, he was alone in a room, staring out a hospital window with tears rolling down his face, questioning whether he'd ever lace up his boots again. But he wasn't the only one unraveling. Back in Florida, Becky Lynch was trying to hold everything together. For the world, she stayed silent. No tweets. No appearances. Just stillness. But inside, she was breaking. Friends say she stopped sleeping. That the bright, fierce fire that had always burned behind her eyes was flickering. Not because she was afraid for Seth's career, but because she saw the doubt consuming the man she loved. They had always been fighters. Always been equals. But nothing prepares you to watch your partner fall apart in slow motion. Becky had seen injuries before. But this one wasn't just physical. It was spiritual. Seth wasn't just afraid of never walking again. He was afraid of being forgotten. Of being left behind by a machine that never stops moving. And that's when Roman called. He didn't ask. He didn't offer pity. He just said, "Tell him I'm still fighting for him." That call was a spark. Small. But enough for Becky to start pushing the idea to Seth, the idea that even if he couldn't wrestle yet, he could still show up. That the fans didn't need to see him win a match. They just needed to see him stand. But Seth wasn't ready, not yet. Meanwhile, the noise outside was deafening. AEW was now at the center of a firestorm. Rumors of Jon Moxley appearing on WWE programming began flooding wrestling media. Journalists, insiders, and fans alike speculated about the impossible, a cross-brand reunion of The Shield. The idea sounded insane. But there were whispers that Paul Levesque and Tony Khan had spoken in private. That one moment, one appearance, had been greenlit. Not for profit. Not for ego. But for closure. Sources claimed that the plan was simple: WrestleMania. A moment. A final walk together. Roman. Seth. Dean. No weapons. No match. Just three men walking that ramp one last time. Together. But for it to happen, Seth needed to say yes. In the weeks that followed, WWE kept dropping breadcrumbs. Shield footage aired during commercial breaks. Social media feeds were flooded with nostalgic tributes. Commentators began referencing the past, moments from 2012, from their legendary battles against Evolution, against the Wyatt family, against each other. Fans began demanding it. Not just hoping. Demanding. #OneLast Shield trended worldwide, and quietly, Seth Rollins began to change. The rehab room became his battlefield. Every session was war. Every step forward was defiance against fate. Doctors told him to take it slow. Seth didn't listen. He pushed hard. Because for him, this wasn't just about recovery. It was about redemption. One night, after a brutal rehab session left him on the floor, drenched in sweat and screaming through gritted teeth, Becky knelt beside him and whispered, "They still believe in you. Don't you dare let this be your last chapter." That was the moment. That was when Seth looked up and said, "Call them. Tell them I'll be there." And just like that, the wheels began to turn. WWE locked in the segment. AEW approved the appearance. Triple H called it a gift to the fans. Paul Heyman, once the Shield's enemy and architect alike, helped shape the script. And Jon Moxley, Dean Ambrose, boarded a flight under a pseudonym, his destination hidden, his purpose sacred. The plans were kept secret. No promos. No announcements. No teasers. And then WrestleMania night arrived. The crowd inside the stadium buzzed with anticipation. Matches came and went. Surprises unfolded. Titles changed hands. But still, there was a tension. A silence before a storm, and then, the lights went out. A beat of silence. A crackle of static, and then, over the speakers, Sierra. Hotel. India. Echo. Lima. Delta. Shield. The arena exploded. A single spotlight lit up the stage. Out walked Roman Reigns. Hood up. Eyes hard. Alone. Then Jon Moxley. Leather jacket. Head down. Jaw clenched. The crowd lost it, and finally, slowly, carefully, Seth Rollins. He wasn't running. He wasn't flying. But he was walking, leg braced. Face tight with pain. But walking. The three men stood side by side. No fireworks. No smoke. Just brothers. A decade of war. A lifetime of pain, and as they raised their fists in unison, Roman in the center, Seth and Dean at his side, the crowd chanted louder than they ever had before. Thank you, Shield. Some say it was just nostalgia, but for those who knew the story, for those who had followed every twist, every betrayal, every tragedy, it was something more. It was a funeral. It was a baptism. It was a goodbye not just to an era but to the boys who became legends together. And somewhere backstage, Paul Heyman reportedly wept because he knew. We all knew that this wasn't a return. It was a farewell. A final chapter written in pain, respect, and unspoken love. And as Roman Reigns raised Seth's hand one last time, he whispered, "We never needed gold. We just needed each other." And Seth Rollins smiled. A real smile. The architect. The visionary. The survivor still standing, and finally, at peace. What followed WrestleMania wasn't loud. It wasn't explosive. There was no betrayal. No surprise attack. No heel turn. Just quiet, and for once, that silence was sacred. Seth Rollins didn't speak to the media. He didn't post a selfie. He didn't even acknowledge the thunderous applause that had accompanied his walk down that ramp, because for him, that moment wasn't for publicity. It was for closure. For legacy. And for Roman. Hours after the event, while most of the WWE roster celebrated in hotels and private bars, Seth was already being wheeled into a private surgical wing in Chicago. The damage in his knee had worsened in recent weeks from aggressive rehab. And even though doctors had cleared him to walk short distances for the Shield reunion, it had come at a steep price. Surgeons worked through the night. Reconstructive surgery. Full ACL graft. MCL repair. Meniscus reinforcement. 9 months. Again. Maybe longer. When Roman got the call confirming Seth had made it through surgery, he didn't speak. He just exhaled. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end. That Seth wasn't just a memory frozen in time. That he still had more story left to tell. But something had shifted in Roman too. For years, Roman Reigns had carried the weight of the company. Through cancer. Through the pandemic. Through main event after main event. He had outlasted nearly every rival, dominated every faction, and stood tall even when fans turned on him. But now, Roman was tired, not weak. Not finished, but tired, and for the first time, he was thinking about something no one had ever imagined he would, walking away not in defeat, but in peace, not because he had nothing left to prove, but because the people he did it for, the brothers he bled with, were gone or broken. In the week after WrestleMania, Roman met privately with Triple H in Stamford.no press. No production, just a quiet meeting in a glass office as the sun set over WWE headquarters. Sources inside say the conversation was long, emotional, and filled with memories. Roman didn't demand a title match. He didn't ask for a creative pivot. He didn't even mention the bloodline. He simply asked, "What does it look like, if I finish this on my terms?" Triple H reportedly nodded. And said, "Then let's make it beautiful." Meanwhile, back on Raw, Becky Lynch was stepping into the spotlight. For the first time since the news broke, fans weren't sure what to expect. She hadn't wrestled since Seth's injury. Her social media was quiet. No appearances, no interviews, no cryptic hints. But that night, Becky walked down the ramp in all black. No makeup. No entrance pose. Just her, a microphone, and 20,000 people watching in dead silence. When she spoke, her voice trembled. "You all know me as the man. The fighter. The one who doesn't back down. But tonight, I'm not here as that. I'm here as a wife. As a mother. As someone who's watching the person she loves more than anything in this world fight a battle no one ever prepares for." A few in the crowd began to cry. Others just watched, breathless. Seth Rollins has given everything to this business. His knees. His back. His soul. And now, maybe his future. But I need you to understand something. This isn't a retirement speech. This isn't a farewell. This is a promise. She looked directly into the camera. You haven't seen the last of him. And until the day he walks down that ramp again, whether it's 6 months, a year, or longer, I'll be fighting in his place. I'll be carrying his name. Because he's carried all of us for long enough. The crowd erupted. A standing ovation. And chants of Seth. 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 Backstage, wrestlers lined the hallway. Not for Becky. But for what she represented: loyalty. Love. And a reminder that in this world of storylines and kayfabe, there are still moments that are real. Later that night, Roman Reigns called her. No cameras. No production team.